Welcome to the Focus Schools podcast, Leading for Impact. My name is Brett Bishop, and I am absolutely thrilled today to be joined, as always, by my good friend Kathy Crum. How are you today, Kathy?
I'm great, Brett. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have a special privilege today, joined by one of our favorite colleagues, and we joked as we were talking a little bit already this morning that we have the whole country covered because all the way from California we have Sandy Blazer. How are you today, Sandy?
I'm great, Brett. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to see you, and I guarantee it's warmer where you are than where I am.
Oh, for sure.
As always. But so we're really excited today because we wanted to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about some awesome leadership work that's gone on in a district in California that you've been working with, and that's Downey Public Schools. And wondered if you just might start by sharing with us a little bit about the history of the partnership and how they arrived at the current work that you were doing, and just teach us a little bit about that.
So we've been working with Downey Unified with Focus Schools for several years now, and doing work with ILTs, with secondaries and elementary. This particular partnership with Warren High School started with myself and the principal, Carrie White, I want to say about 5 years ago when she went from being assistant principal to principal of the school. And so I became her coach.
Yeah, so you guys started 5 years ago. Can you sort of briefly describe where they started and kind of where they ended up?
You bet. So Carrie is just one of those leaders that leads by example. You know, she is the one working just as hard or harder than anyone. So that example she sets for me as a coach was really great because I've had to sometimes talk to principals about, you got to attend the meetings, you got to show up, and that's not a thing I ever had to say to her. What I did have to say to her though is you cannot do this by yourself.
Hmm.
It was, literally at the beginning killing her. I mean, not literally killing her, but figuratively killing her,
Yeah.
and just working so hard. And it's a big school. It's 3,600 kids. Um, Three-quarters of them are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And it's an urban school just outside of LA that has a long history. And she really wanted to make a difference. So we really started working on how do you spread leadership in the school. So that was kind of the theme of the beginning years, a couple of years of our work together.
One of the things that you were talking about is that challenge that I think highly effective people, who migrate into leadership positions in schools often encounter the idea that maybe in previous jobs, me doing superhuman things was enough. And
Right.
then they come to a place where they realize, oh my gosh, that isn't going to be enough. I have to get a whole bunch of people to work with me, and I've got to partner and I've got to lift them. And that story is to me a really great one that a lot of principals go through. So it's cool to hear you talk about that.
Right.
In you specifically, one of the things that I really enjoyed reading about on our impact stories on our website that you prompted us to look at was the story about them taking a look at some things that they thought were a challenge that specifically dealt with their schedule and other things. I wonder if you might teach us a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the things in a high school setting, schools are really trying to offer college level classes. They're really trying to give kids a lot of electives. Sometimes students who, for example, are in a program for English language learners, they take a second English class and they don't get a chance to play an instrument.
Mm.
Or a kid who plays an instrument who also wants to be in sports and also wants to be an artist and take AP classes and a
Mm.
college class. So they had that challenge. And also, um, I've been working with schools looking at intervention programs for years. And what happens often is they take their money and they do a before or after school intervention program. And I will always say, what does the data say? It
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Mm.
The kids that need to come don't come. The
Right.
teachers aren't engaged with the students that they have often. So they needed to figure out a way to bring intervention into the school day without punishing kids, and keeping them from taking other programs. So that's when they really started looking at an alternative school schedule.
To me, that's like one of those things where it's at our best in schools, we're giving everybody what they need, you know,
Right.
but it's really hard to do.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
And so we started talking about the block schedule, and in many districts, especially in places that have collective bargaining. Teachers, if it's a schedule other than the schedule that is in their contract, it has to be voted on by a majority of the school. So we took a year to really research the block schedule, which allows kids to take up to 8 classes versus 6. And so it's almost like if you want an extra year worth of schooling in 4 years. And so we looked at it, and with the block schedule, the classes are, just for sake of argument, 90 minutes instead of, say, 45 or 50, and they
Mhm.
meet every other day. So it's a little bit more like a college. The teacher's preparation time also extends from 45 or 50 minutes to 90 minutes. So there's things you can do with that as well. And you have to really look instructionally about what you're going to change. Because if the teachers keep teaching the same way and at 50 minutes they stop and say, okay, do your homework or talk to your
Mm.
friends, you
Yeah.
just lost a whole bunch of instructional time.
Mm.
So we spent an entire year looking at it, researching it, meeting with small groups of teachers, getting people to understand how you're going to really use a lesson plan with gradual release of responsibility in order to have a powerful 90-minute lesson, how to use your conference period time. So the staff voted for the block schedule, and that's been in place now this is the 4th year of the block schedule at the school.
Yeah, Sandy. So far, I mean, you really have talked about distributing the leadership, which is research based, and you've talked about actually how you met her where she was. She was doing everything right except for not distributing the leadership. And then you brought your knowledge of what doesn't work, the intervention blocks, and then had them do the research. So I'd say in our work, I have learned, and this is what the research says too, that communicate almost every problem that happens with something is because of communication or lack thereof. So
Right.
you did talk a little bit about meeting with small groups of teachers and kind of rolling things out that way. But can you give our listeners any other tips about the importance of communication and what are any specific things you might have done to help communicate this work or help them to do it?
Absolutely. One of the things we did is we met with the superintendent and the head of the collective bargaining of the teachers union and some key teachers very early on because there were a lot of skeptics. Anytime change happens, people can get really skeptical.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we were very honest about is the traditional schedule works and it also doesn't work. The block schedule works and it also doesn't work.
Great.
It's what you do with that time.
Mm. It's a good
And
point.
so what happened was there was just incessant training, slide decks, talking with teachers, going knee to knee, using the assistant principals who oversaw departments to go say, like, what would this look like? How does this worry you? And we came up with frequently asked questions.
Mm.
Um, and the one thing we did know is after we started looking at it, we knew the principal and the assistant principals really wanted this schedule. It was a matter of making sure everybody wanted it because they were the ones that had to vote it in. So it was department meetings, it was PLC meetings. They call their ILT the Leadership Coalition.
Mm.
So much work was done at the LC level, because those Leadership Coalition members are department heads, and then they would go back to their department. And and the idea was to make it really honest and say, tell us what you're worried about. Don't talk behind our back in the parking lot.
Right. Doesn't do any
What are
good.
you worried about? And they answered every question. And when they couldn't answer a question, they went and found out.
Mm.
And what it ended up doing was giving them those things they wanted, is to be able to expand intervention, expand choice for kids, and get kids more engaged in the school. And it was about that communication. So when that schedule happened, there was not that, oh, the honeymoon's over time. That
Mm.
didn't happen
Okay.
because they planned for that.
One of the points points that you made there was, in my experience in scheduling, is there isn't a perfect schedule, right?
Nope.
It does not exist. It's like Bigfoot, right? If you
Yep.
find it, you're going to make $1 million, right? Because whatever schedule there is, there's always going to be problems with it, right? So
Yep.
to me, it's almost like you have to choose which are your preferred problems, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it feels like voting, right? You have to pick,
Yeah.
there's flaws
Right.
in every candidate. I got to pick which one I can tolerate the problems, right? And I think it's the same thing in scheduling in schools. the thing that I really loved hearing you say was that perhaps the idea of not excluding people from the decision, more including them from the decision and listening to what they see the problems are, really paid off. And I wonder if there's like a way in which, that connects to the ultimate outcomes. And so my question is, how will they measure? How do they measure the success or challenges of this ultimately? What are they using to drive their thoughts of whether this has worked?
That is a really great question. That's super important too, because just changing the schedule and saying we like it, because I will tell you, once a school gets a block schedule, generally people don't go back because the administrators don't have to go out on supervision as often. There's not as many breaks in the day, so there's
Mhm.
not as many altercations at the school, not
Sure.
as many
Right.
tardies.
Yes.
Teachers just went from, say, a 45 to 50-minute conference period a day to a 90-minute conference period a day.
Mhm.
So that part is all, once you're in, they like it. But that again doesn't matter if the results go down. So
Mm.
their whole reason for looking at it was to allow kids to enroll in the college level courses, allow students to be in intervention as a scheduled course during the day with the teacher who they have, for the course. So they have that connection. I mean, to allow a lot of choice.
Mm.
And so they've now, at the end of their third year, they really did a comparison of the data. And it's really mind-blowing. I mean, it really shows the growth in A to G completion, the growth in the California state test scores, the huge growth in the number of kids enrolled in college courses.
Oh, wow.
And what I also really love is the growth in AP enrollment, advanced placement enrollment. And, a lot of schools will say, we don't want to open the doors to AP because if we open the doors, our pass rate's going to go down,
Mm.
because we're letting more kids in. And,
Sure. Right.
some schools actually want to give a little entrance test for AP.
Hmm.
And this is open enrollment. You want the class, they tell them what the class is going to be about, but if you want to take it, you're in. Well, not only did their AP enrollment go way up, their AP pass rate also went up.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so all of those things, there's just nothing that came out of this that was a negative for the results. In California, we have career and technical education where kids have to actually take a 2 to 3 years in an area, and it's called CTE completion. That went through the roof as well because they didn't have to give up taking that completer class because they had to go take senior English,
Mm.
right? So the data is clear that giving those interventions during the day when the kids are, part of their school schedule and offering these college classes, they partnered with the community college. Those professors come right to the campus and teach the courses during the school day.
So many things that you talked about to me, thinking with my Focus Schools hat on,
Yeah.
um, relate back to multiple of the focus frameworks, right? And so one of them that I'm always interested in is the idea of how are we maximizing resources, right?
Hmm.
How are we making the most of our resources? And you just talked about some things there to me that's really visionary, maximizing of resources to benefit kids. To get
Right.
the resources to benefit kids. Because when I first started as a principal, when you said resources, I thought money, right?
Right.
And then someone taught me, well, resources come in a lot of forms. Like where you put your feet as a principal is expending a resource. And I was like,
Right.
oh no. Ouch.
Yeah.
Right. But
Right.
then also the idea of like when we get adults in the same room, we're putting resources towards something, right? And when we're, deciding how long our periods are going to be and what kids can take and all of that. And so I think that to me is a visionary story of using resources.
You hit it on the head. And I think about the resources, it's money, but it's people, time, and talent, right? And that goes to our focus framework one as well. And I really want to spend a minute talking about that
Please.
because this is what this is what made this whole program work is, as I said earlier, Carrie was kind of trying to do this all herself, and
Mhm.
it's impossible. So we spent a lot of time on building the leadership capacity of two main groups, her assistant principals and then her ILT or her leadership coalition. And what happened was, so now we're in this block schedule, and the teachers are getting used to this 90-minute period and having some interventions, and how good are the interventions? We had a really open, honest conversation about if you're not in those rooms and you are not providing a support for the teachers and you're not learning alongside them and doing the things you can do that they may not have time to do because you have an office and you kind of make your own day. The real honest truth is most teachers feel like administrators have no clue what's going on.
Right.
And like, oh yeah, they used to be a teacher. I don't even know if they were good, but
Mm.
or they never in my room and they're trying to tell me what to do. So this school and this team made a concerted effort to align themselves with departments and be a resource, a partner for those departments. So like for example, there's many examples. But in math, the assistant principal, Joe, he is in those rooms all the time. He is supporting those teachers all the time. He is listening to them, and they are talking to kids and saying, "What is your experience in math?" They are finding out from the stakeholders like what works for them. And then they started saying, we've got to dig into instruction. And
Mm.
the only way you can do that is by having the credibility with your team, your teachers. And that's what they did. And it was methodical. And those guys are in rooms and talking to teachers. They are co-planning the professional development. They're gathering things for the department heads because they're teaching all day and they say, well, look at, I can pull this data for you, or I can help design this. And that's happening with AP, that's happening with English language arts, that's happening with special ed. And it's been beautiful for me as the coach because I used to just coach the principal. Now I coach the admin team.
Mm.
And it is a flywheel. It is a flywheel because now it's just little tweaks. They're just doing little tweaks because they have those relationships.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how it's fun to create it, and then it's created, and then you're going, okay, we're done with that. But it sounds like you guys really got systematic, and you created a
Right.
system about how we were going to make sure it rolled out and implement it. So you said you coach with them, and for our listeners who are either central office people or principals themselves, yeah, can you give us some tips about just what your coaching sessions were like with them, maybe how often, and what are some things that you did to help them move the needle and the flywheel?
Right. So we meet 3 to 4 times a month for just
Okay.
an hour, a lot
Okay.
of times, sometimes longer. But in the last couple of years, it's been a shorter period of time more frequently.
Okay.
And we kind of end off each session with, all right, what are we going to do in between before the next session? Just like we want to do with instructional leadership teams, where there's a running agenda and it's not just me, the coach, setting the agenda. It is what are we working on? And it's that beautiful thing that we may be talking about math, which is, Joe's area, but Carrie and Chris and I are all talking together about what he is doing and providing that support. And that then ties into what Carrie's doing with her department or Chris is doing with his departments. And it truly is this group of people making plans that affect the whole school.
And I just want to call out that you said just a few times a month for an hour or less. Oftentimes we hear, especially in larger schools, oh, we don't have time for that, or
Mhm.
we can't get everybody together. But in a few hours a month, you were able to build that system and make sure that that system kept going. So, and you released it to them, it sounds like as well. You built their capacity.
Absolutely. And so now I just think about how my role as a coach has changed so much over my time with them is it was me kind of coming up with, ooh, this is the next thing I know they need to do and guiding them to that to really all of us with our various expertise, just like you want with your admin team, just like you want with your ILT, where it's not the principal setting the agenda for the ILT, it's the ILT setting the agenda. So that's where we're at. And that's what's now translating to their leadership coalition or ILT. And our next big step is to enhance what's happening at that PLC level in the departments. It's going better, but that's in my experience, and probably you too, working with focus schools as long as we all have, is getting it to that level where teachers are leading teachers in those departments or grade level meetings in the elementary is the absolute key to spreading that growth to every corner of the building.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder, that makes me think about if I was a principal, listening to these awesome stories that you're telling us. And I was thinking about, well, we need something similar to happen in my school. How would you suggest I think about starting that? What would be some recommendations you'd make to me as a principal if I was hearing you talk about this?
One of the things I talk with the people I work with a lot is like, what's your lens? Like, what, if your lens is really about making every room a room where you would gladly put your own child or your best friend's child or,
Hmm.
like every room. And let's be real, if you went to almost any school in the nation and said to the principal, would you put your own kid in every single room in the school? They're going to say no.
No. Yeah.
And if you say that, then what are you doing for that?
Yeah.
So I think the way I like to look at it is, what do great teachers do? Great teachers look at their class and don't say, I want to get rid of this guy and this guy. This is my class. How do I find what is the key to each kid? And
Mm,
how do I support each kid in the class? That's what great teachers do. Great principals say that same thing with their admin team and their teachers
mm,
is, this is my team. I'm not trying to get rid of anybody. This is my team. And it's going to take a lot of different ways to get people engaged, especially in a large place like Warren.
mm,
But even in an elementary school, is if you're trying to get your class to
mm,
move forward as a leader, is you got to think of them as your class. You got to love them. You got to be honest with them. You got to let them, you got to get to the point where they can say to you, that idea is really making me mad or nervous or scared or whatever, to have that conversation because they know, just like when you had that teacher that you knew you could just be yourself with, and you knew that teacher believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself, that's what the principal and the admin team has to do
mm.
with across the board. And that's why you need your team, because a principal cannot be everywhere at once. But when you spread that leadership, you can.
mm.
And so that lens is what
Mm.
I talk about a lot with principals, is it's your class. And then you don't hear people then say like, oh, I wish I could,
Yeah.
get rid of that guy.
Get
It's
rid of
no,
them.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to find out what makes this person tick and get my relationship stronger.
I like that. I'm going to steal your phrase there. That's good.
You
That's
got
good.
it.
Good way for them to think about it. Yeah. Well, so Sandy, as I've been listening to you, I've been kind of jotting down what I think that your leadership moves were and your coaching moves were, and so I'm going to say what I learned, and then you guys can chime in too, because I think it helps to just have a little summary. But I think first and foremost, you always had the focus framework in your head and all the areas of the framework that help us to move this work. That's what we all sort of live by. But I heard that first off, you knew that you had to build their capacity by helping the principal to distribute the leadership. You met her where she was, and you said, okay, you're good at this, this, and this, but you need to get better at that.
Right.
So that was knowing your person and then helping them to move to the next step. You also brought your knowledge base. I mean, in that case, you were more of a consultant because you've been a high school principal for a few years, and
Yeah.
and so you know this stuff and you've done a lot of research, so you brought your own knowledge base, and that's a good thing to do. You took the time to let them research together and build together, and one of the things that's I think maybe unique about where you were is that the whole staff has to vote on everything, it's and stuff, so that really raises
Right.
that raises the bar if the people are all going to vote for it, right? So you took the year to help them learn together, and we know from the research about change that when people learn together, they build those relationships, and so that's several things are happening at one time, right? You had a very systematic communication plan that included everybody at the school. It sounded like in one way or another, and you guys weren't afraid to address the hard questions and be honest. It was based around honesty and not trying to hide anything, and it was systematic. Um, I think this was really key when Brett asked the question about how do you know, what was the data? And you said we started with our purpose, which was to make sure that more kids got to be involved in more different kinds of classes. And so then you directly connected the data to that, and you were able then not only to see that, but also some gains for the kids. And you sounded like you used data along the way. Then you specifically built leadership capacity F1 for a specific group of targeted people, the APs and the Leadership Coalition. So you knew who the levers were, where the levers were for change. And then you also know the next lever, which is the teachers and the department chairs running those things, running those meetings. That will be your next step. So those are the things that I kind of pulled out as leadership moves. And then I love the what is your lens? I love that question as a coaching question for anybody. So yeah. Did I miss anything that you or Brett did you hear things that I was busy crazy? I thought I'd have four. I have 11. So
Oh, wow. But I will say
it's not a summary, it's a recap, I'd say, right?
you brought up something that's really key that I love about focus schools because, as you two know, that I was an elementary, middle, and high school principal for like 30 years. And of that 30 years, probably 25 of those years, I worked for focus schools on a very limited basis because I had a full-time job. But why I was able to do that on the side was because of the framework. It's not it. What I love about focus schools is like we're not selling something. It's a framework. So it is. It helped me as a principal be a successful principal because I said I've got to have something going on in each of these areas and I got to monitor it. Then the school will move. And if I leave something out, when I go, it'll be over or we're not going to get anywhere. So that to me, when you brought up the framework, is if anything I can get across is that needs to be the backbone of what you're doing is paying attention to making sure you're addressing the areas of the framework because it works for any school because you can decide what your schedule is, you can decide what your evidence-based practices are, you can decide how you're using your resources, but you have to make decisions around those things.
Yeah, it always feels to me like you use the analogy of like the great teacher, and this feels to me analogous to like great leadership pedagogy. It's like
Yeah,
the focus, it feels like
yeah.
the pedagogy of leadership. And just listening to you both, I always love talking to both of you because I feel like it's the experience that I had as a principal where you can have people help you to rethink about
Yeah.
all the energy you're putting in. There's no variable with your effort and your energy. Everybody's trying really hard and working long hours, but it's seeing is that going to get you the return? And that was just a fabulous story that you told us there, Sandy. We so appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
My true
And
pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, we encourage anybody who has watched or listened to this video cast to get a chance to go to our website, and you can see all kinds of different opportunities to gain new ideas from people just like you doing the hard work you're doing to help students. And we feel privileged at Focus Schools to be helping you to do that. We also can access all of our social media pages there by going to focusschools.com. And we thank you for being the people who have chosen to work with students and those who are most in need. So thanks for being those people, and thanks for listening to us today.